Hello and welcome to another video from the only channel that you need to not only survive the current apocalypse but actually enjoy it. And today I'm going to be talking about some comments that were made on the last video that I produced. People were going on and on about how beautiful my trees were, which that happens every time I make a video out here in these woods. But I told people, well, the reason that I don't make videos out here very often is because it's become so densely overgrown that I really just can't, because it's just too much work to get all my equipment out here and whatever, and it doesn't look good. Well, honestly, I think a lot of people that live in the city think this looks beautiful, and it actually kind of does. I'll show you kind of what it looks like here. Probably going to have to use the microphone on this camera from this distance. But as you can see, this is, and it doesn't look bad, but like years ago when I was making videos from this spot, pretty much you could see clearly through my woods all the way around, because this wasn't quite this bad. It was nice and smooth, almost like a golf course with trees. Anyway, when I did that, somebody made the comment that I had said before, that if you clear your woods and you keep them clear, they'll eventually become self-maintenance. And so I thought, well, they kind of have. I don't want to go back and sound like a liar, because I did say that. I had a video, and I can't remember the name of it, but I'll put a link to it here. But anyways, I'm going to take you on a little tour, and I'm going to kind of go down the original trail that I made 10 years ago, which I maintained every year. I maintained that part of the trail. And in fact, every year I made it wider. I made other trails. And so some of the areas out here, like this area right here, are basically the most recently cleared, because this is the farthest from my house. So every year I get a little further out, a little further out. And so that's why this has grown up a lot. But if we go closer to the house where the trail begins, it actually is kind of maintaining itself. It's been 2.5 years since I actually came out here and did anything, which is all about to change. I'm about to do this, fix this again, clean, cut it and prune these trees and such. But for right now, let's just go take a look at what it's like in my woods. It's not like my woods aren't picturesque when I'm not cutting the grass or mowing the woods or pruning my trees. But it does limit me. There are places like this that are beautiful, but even places like this aren't always usable, because when it rains, we get a long time where this is too wet to hang around in. See, I'd have to be standing in mud to videotape right here. I don't know if you can actually get a sense of direction when I'm doing these videos where I'm walking around the woods. But let's see, that right there is my house. You probably can't see anything, maybe a little bit of the roof. There's my hen house. So if you know where that is, when you walk past the hen house, you go through a gate, you go over a little bridge, which you can barely see there, and then this trail leads to me. Okay, from where I'm standing, if I turn 180 degrees, you can see the original trail that I created when I first started clearing out here. So we'll walk up here just so you can get an idea of where we are. There's my tent. Anyway, if you look at the ground cover here, it's really smooth. And I have not come out here in 2.5 years with my mower. Now what I have done is cut down a few sickly trees, and so this is a bunch of shoots coming up off of the root of a tree I cut down. But other than that, most of this looks really, really good. But as we get to trails that are not as old as this, you'll start to notice a whole lot more growth, undergrowth, because you gotta stay on top of this until the whole thing is at least as self-maintaining as this area. If you notice, I cut back a little bit here a couple of years back, and if you see, it's still growing up. There's stuff coming up there that needs to be dealt with. But if I cut this down every year for 10 years, then it'll eventually look like a lawn all the time without doing anything. And over here, these are the areas where I've never actually got them cleared. So, you know, if I was to clear that, it would take 10 years to get it to maintain itself like that. The whole deal is to create something while you're young and healthy that won't need any maintenance when you're too old and too decrepit to be pushing a machine around. Once again, there's areas that have been cleared for about 3 or 4 years, I guess, maybe 5 years. And then here is an area that's been cleared for about maybe 7 or 8 years. So we're making a big curve here. We're not going the same. We were traveling east initially, now we're traveling north. Here's my bridge I built years ago when I intended to make a trail up to my neighbor's house so that he could come back here and enjoy himself. But of course he poisoned my dog and cut down my fruit trees and poisoned my garden, so that kind of put an end to me wanting to do anything with him. This gets really wet here too. I'd have to put some stepping stones to that bridge. It's since we've been having a lot of rain, it's showing me that there are areas that really can't be walked across all the time. Now this area to the left has been cleared for quite a while, and whenever I do get out here, I always make a point of getting here before spring to cut everything down, because that gives the ferns a chance to take over. Because once they get up, they put out enough shade that nothing else can grow up under them. But this area is really wet, so yeah, a lot of the time you cannot push a mower through that. And like I said, I haven't been able to get out here for 2.5 years. These are blueberries, and there are some of them right here. I didn't know if these would ever produce because there's so much shade here. But anyways, these are huckleberries. And we never get but a few huckleberries on this bush, but if you look at it, it's loaded with huckleberries now. Some of them are already turning colors. And the reason I planted this blueberry here is because I want it to be next to this huckleberry. Blueberries and huckleberries supposedly can pollinate each other. I don't know if that's true or not, but I don't think the wind pollinates them anyway. I think it requires insect activity. See, these are blueberries. Well, I'm really happy that I came out here with this camera, because I have not noticed these blueberries until today. Oh, look, even this little one is covered. I don't know if y'all can see that cardinal up there. Anyways, this area here didn't get cut this year, and so you see there are some things coming up through the ferns. Usually if I'll get out here and just cut all this down early spring, I could even cut it down right now if I had the ability, but it's just too wet. But if I cut it down right now, the ferns would come back, and they would come back strong enough to keep everything else out. They're kind of doing that on their own now. When I first moved up here, those ferns were rather sparse. See, here's another area. It's a different kind of fern, but it's doing the same thing. And there's my beehive. I'm going to get my bees tomorrow or the next day. So when I do that, I'll make a video of putting the bees in the hive. Look at this little spider thing moving around, worm, whatever he is. It's like a larvae or something. He's got that shell on his back, like a snail shell, but his is made out of, it's like leaves or something. Okay, we'll go over here to the area. One of the last areas I cleared, and take a look at that. If you notice, this is like really growing up with a bunch of stuff that's, like even stickers are in there, and a lot of beauty berries. That's a beauty berry. Now here's a little tangerine tree. Here's an area that was completely cleared a couple of years ago, and it's looking really, really fuzzy. You know, it's not the way I want it to look. And since this is under these oaks, it would really be easy to get this to where it stayed like a lawn all the time, because those oaks put out a lot of shade and a lot of tannic acid. I think it's tannic acid from the leaves falling. So if you can keep this stuff cut down for a couple of years, it won't come back, because the only thing that can live in here is, you know, is plants that can tolerate the acid. Oh well, here's my area where I do most of my videos when I'm just talking to the camera. Earlier I showed how the squash came up just from me dumping my compost here. But if you look at it, you can see the leaves are getting ate up. Well, those insects that are eating the leaves of the squash will also eat the squash once it starts coming up. In fact, we got a few little squashes on the ends of these flowers. Let's see, here's one. I'd said before, I thought that this was spaghetti squash, and that's what that looks like, spaghetti squash there. 2.5 years ago, when the last time I mowed this place, I went ahead and cleared this area, which is getting a lot of sunshine now. And a lot of what was in here was grapevines, and that's what all of this is. These are just grapevines, and once you take the shade away, grapevines go crazy. And not having been out here to cut this back in 2.5 years, it's taken over. So I'm going to probably this year, if I get around to the pruning, I'll throw all of the branches and stuff on this pile and light it up to, you know, because it's one of the few places I have where I won't kill a tree, you know, with the smoke and the heat. So, you know, get rid of all these vines that are choking everything out. And they really are choking everything out. You see them going up this oak right here, this water oak. And then over here, they've actually reached the limbs of this water oak. And I know it probably took me an hour to get all of the vines out of this tree when I finally cleared here. So this is really, really backtracking. So hopefully you can see that what I was saying is true, that a lot of the areas that have been well maintained for about 10 years are now beautiful. They will take care of themselves all the way until the end of my life. And in fact, if I can keep doing this, you know, every time you clear it, you make it easier for the forest to maintain itself. You know, when Adam and Eve were put out into the forest, it says they were put there in order to dress and keep the forest. Well, if we look at that in its original languages, what it says there, which I think is a really, really beautiful statement, is make sure that nothing bad happens to the forest in order that the forest will make sure that nothing bad happens to you. Oh well, I hope you'll enjoy this little tour, and as always, if you don't want to survive, don't listen to me.